сьогодні композиторка, яка працює не лише з анімацією, як ви могли би подумати, з фестивалю сучасної анімації та медіа-арту «Лінолеум». Я взагалі радий всіх вітати. Це композиторка з Італії, яка взагалі відома у всьому світі і відома не лише своїми проектами, а співпрацею.
Not only by her projects, but in the collaboration with the producers and film directors. She graduated from the school in Berlin. She studied in the UK, and in fact, one of her animation movies could be watched several months ago. It was shown in Kiev in Kievska Rus Luminaries, and this composer was working on the music, so not to keep her with her presentation.
Enrica Sciandrone, thank you very much.
Hi, thank you for introducing me, and thank you for having me at this very interesting festival. I've been also tutoring Chloe Knibbs for her collaboration. Chloe is a composer, and she collaborates with the Ukrainian animator Yuliia Shalimova. And so I was tutoring Chloe as part of the framework of Envision Sound on behalf of the British Council. So I had the fortune to see, how the creative environment is, and I had the fortune to see this collaboration blossoming and developing further. As I said, my name is Enrica Sciandrone. I'm a film composer and a professor in composition for screen at the Royal College of Music in London. In my career, I've written music for over 20 animations for various projects, and mainly short films, advertising, TV series pilots. So this talk will cover some aspect of writing for animation from a composer's point of view, focusing in particularly on the relationship between composer and director-animator. Before starting, I just want to make sure that my levels, the level of my voice is all right, everything is fine. If someone can give me a thumb up so that I can keep continuing with my presentation before the question and answers. And is it all good? Can I go ahead? I assume I can, if nobody say anything. So right, so let's start with the complex relation between composers and animators. It's not a complex relation. After all, we both are very creative people. But creative people are also sometimes difficult to handle. So what each other needs to know, this is the main point of this slide. So before presenting some practical examples from my own experience, I'd like to make some, general pointers. As I said, composers and animators definitely share passion for creativity, but at the same time, their worlds are so much different. So let's start with composers where, I can elaborate more about composers than on animators, and I invite any animator that is watching this lecture to maybe keep some notes for further questions later on, or some observation about what I'm going to say from my experience and my point of view. So let's start with composers, as I said. So first thing first, this may sound really nonsensical, but we don't like to talk about music. And you may say, okay, why? This doesn't make sense. We are music composers. Yes, indeed. But when we are talking with directors, we want to know really what is the idea behind the story. what is the narrative behind, if there is a narrative, or if there is a general idea. I mean, it could be an abstract idea, or just sometimes even if you talk about colors, sometimes it's even better than talking about music, because what are the pitfalls? Unless you are a musician yourself, and so you do know about music and you do know what style you prefer or this kind of things, then really talking about music doesn't get us anywhere. So if you start saying things like, I don't know, I want this, more dynamic. For us, dynamic means different things. And I mean, what kind of dynamics? You mean loud and soft, or active or static? I mean, unless you are a musician yourself, the conversation may be a little bit pointless. It's like if composers would talked about editing or animation techniques with animators. We wouldn't have the insight that animators have, frankly, and could also appear a little bit presumptuous. So it's much better to talk about general ideas. Of course, if you have musical example that you wanted to quote, it's fine, but then let's try to elaborate what thing in that music style you like. Is it the style per se? Is the rhythm? Is maybe, that is something that the composer can walk you through and can manage to to extract from your reasoning, because you may say, I like this piece of music, without knowing exactly why you like it. So it's quite important to consider this kind of, as I said, this kind of paradox that I placed as my first pointer here. Then, second point, we need to be organized. As I'm going to show you later, the craft of a composer is faceted in different tasks. A composer may be involved in other projects, have a parallel activity to carry on, and different deadlines. So, and therefore, we like clear deadlines and clarity in general. So to write the right music, we need the right amount of time. And even if it's a quick turnaround, we understand that. As long as we have a clarity and a clear idea of what is the calendar is going to be and the schedule is going to be. That's all what we need. And then remember this triangle here, which is, you can apply for different things. You can substitute music with animation as well. But in general, this applies for most of mediatic arts. So given this triangle, music, money, and time, you can't have the best outcome of the three of them together. You can only have two best outcomes, but not the others. So if you want the best music with a very short amount of time, you have to pay more money. If you have little money and you want the best music, you have to allow more time, and so on. So you understand what I'm heading here. It's a general rule that applies, as I said, for most mediatic arts in general. So let's see what now I will talk about animators from my own experience. So bear in mind, this is it's far from a generic rule, but it's mostly like, in case there are any composers attending this lecture, is a way to identify things that are in common with their experience. So first of all, animators are also very busy people. Sometimes they are in charge of more than one task. for the animation. So we composers are well aware of the sheer amount of stress and commitment and tasks that animators have to bear on themselves. So we understand that. And in my experience, I never came across a situation where the animator kept his or her word regarding the timing, so how long some sequence are of his or her animation. Even when they were saying, okay, this is a storyboard, but the timing won't change. I know, maybe 80% of the times the timing will change. And it's not that, sometimes you may think, oh yes, it just changed by 1 second. Depending on how fast the music is, 1 second can be a lot for a musical point of view. So a general tip for animator would be, okay, so if you have a storyboard, so where everything is still not well shaped, let's talk about ideas. When you have a sort of time storyboard that fits a little bit better the timing that you have in mind, try to be as precise as possible. So try to identify the sections of your animation that are not going to change so much. And so you can say, okay, why don't you focus on section number, this section here, that it may be well in the middle of an animation or at the end of the animation. It doesn't matter, as long as you have an idea that is not really going to change. That really helps the composer to help you out, because then you have to consider that is if the music works well, and then you can kind of use that music to edit around it somehow, and then you get a better outcome, because then it becomes a proper collaboration. But as I said, I'm going to show some example from my experience, so that you can have a better idea of what the possibilities are. Then there is one thing that is not only it's not only for animation in general nowadays. There is the practice of temping a video that is still in an editing stage with music, and we define it as temp track. That stands for temporary tracks. So temporary because they are going to be replaced by the composer's original music. The practice of using temp tracks is particularly helpful in animation because it will offer the animator or the editor or whoever is doing the editing a good idea of the timing and the mood. And as I said before, if the animator have a piece of music in mind, just having that in the background whilst he's still doing his job as an animator and animating the video, then definitely will help shaping things in a certain way, right? So the problem with temp track is falling in love with them, and that's the struggle that most composers have. If you find online, you find many talks of very established composers about this topic, saying, on one hand, temp tracks are really helpful because they shorten the amount of guessing that the composer have to do in order to create the right music. So you have this music that you already like, the director likes the music, and you have to get as close as possible, maybe just elaborating what is the hook of that temporary track that works, and try to encompass in your original work. So in a way it cuts a lot of time out of the composer's job, and make things a little bit straightforward. But on the other hand, most composers agree with me that these are little traps, because the director may fall in love so much with a temp track that will require you to get as close as possible, almost to the point of, being sued for plagiarism. So that's the problem with temp tracks. And the other problem with temp tracks is that directors or animators need to be realistic, because, for instance, sometime I with a certain budget, I received a temp track that was, massively rich. So it was displaying, a very big orchestral score that has been recorded in a proper studio and so on. So, and I say, okay, do you have the money for doing such a thing? And, the budget wasn't allowing that. And I say, okay, so there's no way that you can have the same quality. I can do, I can do some sort of, I can do my best with sample libraries, but definitely you won't have that sound without a proper budget. So animators need to work on this, on accepting that a temp track is a temporary track, and the reason why you asked a composer to jump the ship, that it's because you trust him or her in doing a much better job, because it's going to be original music, never written before. It may have some elements of the temp track, as I said. Work on what is the element of that music that you like the most, and the reason why you want that to, to be replicated in the original work from the composer. So that is very important. And then the other thing to reflect on, and it's very difficult nowadays, is whether or not you're asking for music or sound design. Nowadays, the lines between music and sound design are really blurred. To the point, and I said, as I said, I have a practical example that I'm going to quote later on, where I was composing something, of course, and then the sound designer asked me to have that particular sound because she wanted to use somewhere else in the animation. So sometimes lines are very blurred, but nevertheless, I think you need to clarify yourself. If it's a musical gesture or a sound design, and what kind of, and if it's possible to have a collaboration with the sound designer, and if not, whether or not the composer should provide some sound designer ideas. So by knowing that, the composer and the sound designer could effectively liaise in order to strengthen the narrative. And it's all about the narrative of your animation, or the main idea. Let's call it main idea, because some animation may not be narrative at all. But that is what matters, and we need to serve that, both composers and visual artists and sound designers and so forth. Now, I think it's also important to show what a composer does when writing a soundtrack. So we don't simply have fun. Of course we do, because we love what we do, but it's not always just fun. And I think it's also up to us to make a point and say, this is, I enjoy doing my work, but it's actually it's faceted again in many different tasks, as the animator's job, I mean, I'm not saying that it's not comparable. I'm saying, what I know most. And of course, the animator have tons of other things to do, of course. So I would distinguish in music pre-production, post-production, and post-production. So in the pre-production, basically, there will be the back and forth between regarding establishing the right idea, the right pace, the right sound, the right hook, talking about all these things like, if there is a temp track in mind or a favorite track in mind, what is that can be taken out from that and re-elaborated and so forth. Then creating demos for approval and try to see what is the response. Music production is when the overall idea is agreed, and maybe it's just the first bit of work that you've done, and then you have to extend it to the entire animation. Whether or not the animation is completed, which is part of the next point I wanted to make later on. So we have to shape the music with the edit, which doesn't mean simply copy and paste things. It most of the time means making variation and writing additional music and so on. Then whether or not there is a collaboration in place and liaising with the sound designer, making changes when we get to picture lock, if it wasn't before, and getting the final thumb up. Getting a decently sounding mix that can stand as either the final track or the reference track, because the other thing is whether or not there is a budget for recording, then the next task for the music production in the music production phase is to find musicians, recording and mixing. That depends merely on the type of contract that you have. So if it's what we define as a package fee, usually a package fee means writing, recording and mixing costs all together. But some contracts are better than others. So some contracts may say, okay, just writing and recording, and the mixing is a separate voice in the budget of the animation. And finally, the post-production, creating stems when everything is done. Stems are part of the musical textures, often categorized by function. So, for instance, rhythmic stems, electronic patches, atmospheric pads, instruments divided by families, so strings, brass, woodwinds, whatever. They're really important for the dub, which is our final deadline, I call it. So that's the first thing I always ask my collaborators is, okay, when is the dub date? Because that is my final deadline when no further changes can be made. And the dub is basically the mix with music, dialogues, and effects. Okay, so many tasks here, and as I said, it's just showing around what we composers do. Now, one of the main things that I wanted to talk with you about is whether or not it's worth composing before or after the picture lock. And it's specifically, I think it's something very specific also for animation, where the final animation really arrives very, very late in the process. I guess the best turnaround I had is with a recent production. It was considerably, I had a lot of time to reshape things. I believe like 1 month before the dub. So it was, that was the maximum I ever got for picture locked animation. But otherwise, sometimes it's 2 days before the dub, or So what I'm saying is that, especially in animation, I found myself very often working beforehand. So when the picture lock is not there yet. And in fact, I mean, this is why storyboards are around for, right? Even with fast turnaround like adverts, I was working on storyboards that were roughly about the length required, because then the advert set a specific time frame, but things were changing and moving a lot, so as always, I had to go through different versions all the time. So there are pros and cons, of course. So the pro of writing before, I think, and it's invaluable, is the free flow of ideas and inspiration. It's where really you can imagine things before having seen them, and then really work on the ideas rather than on the technical aspects. Composing after the picture lock is clearly more practical, because it's faster. Everything is faster. I mean, you know the time frame and the timing of your media, and it's much easier to write around that. So it's a much. I mean, it's a fast turnaround, really. The other pro, of composing before the picture lock is that if the director falls in love with your music, he may end up editing on the music that you composed. And I have, as I said, I have an example that I hope to show you. I mean, time is getting much faster than initially I thought. Anyway. The cons of writing before, of course, it's lots and lots of versions and changes in the music making. So I think for the last project I reached something like my 7th version. For short animation is 2.5 minutes. So sorry. So it's just the sheer amount of time in doing versions and things. If you're not, which sometimes is not pleasant. It doesn't bother me anymore, but I also have quite a good experience now in writing different versions with different timings. Clearly, from a composer point of view, especially if you start the first times, it's really annoying, because you get attached to the original idea that you have. After picture lock, the only cons is, would that be more creative? That's the little doubt that may raise, because after all, you wrote on a script or on something that was already set in place, and you didn't have the time to maybe think outside that box. Anyway, that's the main point. In my own experience, I must say, although I mean it's a little bit nonsensical, because it's more time consuming, but the times that I worked before the picture lock, and in some cases I worked on the script, I enjoyed the process much more. But really, I mean, without any doubt, it won't make sense for the budget in the sense that whatever I've been paid for, I won't repay the time that I spent, between the versions and so on. But hey, I mean, we are here because we love what we do, right? So that's the most important thing. So let's go through some examples. I think I will have roughly 10 minutes to present each one of them. I can't show much of the 3 examples that I have, just because they are still on festival in the festival circuit and so on. So let's talk about this first example, which is an animation released in 2020 but dated back in 2018. The first draft that I made was dated back 2 years before, and of course, with COVID, the release was delayed as well. So The Flying Hands, it's a short animation by Giovanni Meola, an Italian director I've been working since 2008. And it's a story of a child too young to learn to play, but who still managed to play the piano by mimicking the movements of his grandfather, who plays the piano. And the story goes that, of course, his grandpa eventually dies and he becomes a concert pianist. Now, the key sequence in this animation was a surreal concert for two pianos. It's a surreal concert happening among the stars, where Simone, the protagonist, the young boy that you see here in this frame, is a grown-up man, and his grandpa, that is about the same age as of Simone, play a piece for two pianos. While playing, Simone becomes the little kid again, and his grandpa becomes the old grandpa that we saw at the beginning of this animation, that I'm not going to show you, but just to, I will show the sequence. So the arms start stretching, and so do the pianos. So in this case, you can imagine the music was such an important and fundamental element, because clearly it's part of the narrative. The concert couldn't be done with a temp track. It had to be something that is really part of the story. And I remember having very long conversations with the director. He's based in Italy, I'm based in UK, and we were talking about the style and what the music should represent, what should be displayed, and lots and lots of talks. I'm not going to. This is before the. I think by then I had just few frames of how the animation should have been, because that is what I request. I asked expressively to have the drawings, just to get an idea of what is each animation is different, and then I feel that if it's a 2D animation rather than a 3D, it changes a lot the way you approach it, or if it's a stop motion, for instance, and things and so on. And there was maybe a storyboard, but was really black and white, and it's not nothing particularly elaborate. Here a screenshot of the many versions that I had to do. So what happened with this piece? So first of all, you have to imagine this was a concert piece, so it's meant to be quite virtuoso, right? So and for two pianos, so it means it's the literature that is around, it's very virtuosistic anyway. So now in my 20s I was a chamber pianist, but I didn't practice since I came to UK. So and this was already a challenge, because I had to provide a demo, but this demo had to be quite realistic. So I know how to write a virtuoso concerto, but I couldn't play it myself at that stage, at least not in that time frame that I was given. So the best bet for me was to write it on a notation software and export the sound that was coming from it, which was very robotic, which corresponds to this MP3, and they were already in two different versions, so one short and one long, because we needed to understand what the ideal timing for the animation could work better. So the director by then, and as you see, I don't know how clearly you can see, so this is dated back in 2016 even, because that was, not because the animation took so long, it's just the director is a busy director, so he had to take it in different stages of his busy schedule. So we started the conversation in 2016. I did provide that concerto piece. He liked the short version of it, So then we went back to 2018, and in 2018 I properly recorded, which means basically I studied the two pieces and played. I mean, it was released actually. I didn't record the two pianos. I used two different sample libraries, and also there was also a matter of. There was something about the narrative that I had to consider. So these two pianos are left and right of the stage, and then at some point they become the angle became wider. They stretch because of this surreal sequence. So I did do the panning in a way that is explaining the director, see, this is when the two pianos needs to move. So in that case, really, music was dictating how the animation had to work. The performance was surreal, and therefore there are even some beats that are not in sync anymore. So, for instance, you will see I'm going to play it for breaking up my long talk. You will see that the two final chords happen when they already are bowing to the public. So I'm going to play it quickly, just to break up the. I have to go. Just a second. Here we are. So this is the concert piece that I'm talking about, and as I said, this is the performance I made and recorded. Here we are. So he sits on the piano, and yeah. So just very quickly, so that was the sequence, and so that was, as you could see. I mean, I don't know how much you know about piano playing, but the movements are not. I mean, are all over the place. It's not realistic. But there was a moment in the animation, I'm not going to show you, where that realism was required, which was the very beginning of the animation. The very beginning of the animation is quite realistic because it needed to be such because it needed to be, you know, the scene where the grandpa was playing, so it was meant to be realistic. And I'm going to show you just a very bit of that. So in preparation of that, I even came across the enormous challenge of doing, let me take it from here.
Hi.
Just give me a second, because it's, I mean, I'm not playing through, but basically this is me. I mean, you can't really see it for some reason. Give me a second, because it seems VLC is not responding. Right.
Hi.
Yeah, it's definitely not responding. It's basically, yeah.
Bye.
Okay, there are two versions. So I'm not playing it, but basically this is me on the piano, and I was doing I was recording this bloody part for just one piano in this case, because it's the grandpa playing on the on the piano, and it came in two different versions. So this was playing very slowly, so for the animators to study the way the hands roughly move around the keyboard. And the other one, which I can't play for some reason because VLC doesn't approve it, the other one was almost, at the right speed for the for the demo that I provided. So in this way, basically, the animator was able to, even to be a little bit more realistic. Although, to get it to that, I mean, it's still a little bit flimsy, but it doesn't really matter. It's just you can be, as long as it's something. So. Now, the next example, for instance, it's from the New Pioneers. It's a production by Beat Films. It's an independent animation studio founded by Chris Perry, and again, it's one of my long-time collaborators right now. The show is set on a future Earth where the natural world has retaliated against humanity. Forcing Min, a teenager girl, and the few remaining humans to take shelter behind a massive electrified dome so that the other animals can't get in. So the show is targeted to children 9+ and families. And this pilot, for instance, I had a completely different, most standardized approach with a temp track that I was asked to get close. But the good thing about Chris is that he always have an open mind about things. And he had an excellent idea to temp this animation with the soundtrack for the feature film The Princess Mononoke, which I'm sure that you know, that by Studio Ghibli. And so what you hear now in this video here is the original temp. As you see, is as bad as it could be sometimes. Like, in the sense the tempo may be appropriate, but then it's cut down abruptly, and then it appears again, and so forth. So here there's nothing, that is what I received. Some noises, again I'm skipping a little bit, and then when the main character goes into action, there is another cue from the same soundtrack. See, I mean, still some still images. This is rough animation still.
Ready to punch through.
Not be a false alarm.
There's no such thing, cadet. If we don't stay vigilant, the world out there will eat us for breakfast.
Not me.
So this is, just clarifying again, this is the rough edit I received back then with the temp music. So we talked with Chris about, what was the main... I found that the temp track really appropriate because it has this kind of primitive quality and so forth, which became eventually this. So this is my music, and you see it's fairly close because I wanted to keep some elements of it alive. So, for instance, the beginning had this kind of very ominous rumble in the low register, and I kept something of it. See here, the music starts earlier than in the temp track, because again, the temp tracks are meant to be referenced, but they don't tell the entire way of doing it. I mean, you are the composer in charge of doing it. And as you see, I mean, there are elements of the original soundtrack that I kept, like this kind of very upbeat quality, because it's more action music. At the same time, she comes close to see her brothers and sisters, and then they are still asleep. So I changed the music to be a little bit slightly not funnier, but a little bit, just showing that there's also a sort of playful element in it. And then she went back to action and so forth. So the job of a composer is, as you see, is to take an idea from the temp track and develop further, or take it.
Ready to through?
Not be a false alarm.
There's no such thing, cadet. If we don't stay vigilant, the world out there will eat us for breakfast.
Not me, Pope.
Okay, so I'll stop here again. I can't show the entire thing. And of course, shaping music is the craft of a composer. So, but the temp track was really helpful, and definitely I took element from the temp track as well. What the show needed, it was a clear theme, which I displayed at the end as well. So. This is a great example. It's an example of working conventionally with a temp track. Now, last but not least, the final example I wanted to show is from Little Bird, which is 2021. So it's currently being submitted, and what you're going to see is a very short example. If I manage, actually, I'm not sure I can, but it's really beautiful, from the same director actually. So it's funded by a mega grant from Epic Games, and the crew was over 50% female identified, and currently being submitted to festivals. So I can't show much and reveal much of it, by Chris Perry and his team, and it's the story of an astronaut who's trying to save her father in space. And she's, again, similarly to the previous one, she's a teenager girl with a lot of energy and ideas. No temp in this case. So Chris learned from the last experience and said, we had a fantastic experience, but after all, he contacted me very earlier on, saying, okay, I don't want any temp. Let's talk about the ideas. And so I was talking with him about demos that I composed, without, I only had the script, honestly. So you can see here an example in this shared screen. You see, I've got some ideas for textures. It's set in space, so maybe this will be a silky texture. So I say, okay, let's work on some generic pointers. So what do you think about this texture here? and and then this is a texture that is a little bit darker because there is a element of danger in that. So more rumbling in the background. Then there was an idea for a theme for the credits, even though I didn't see the film and I didn't have any idea of how the final shape would have been. Were ideas not synced with anything. Of these ones, basically this theme was shaped finally in okay, I'm going to show you the a little excerpt from the film. Something like that. So it's kind of getting there. It's similar. It's similar to what I sorted out. So the theme, in a different version, is much more, powerful. Went into the animation. About the texture, some of those textures were I encompassed them in my score, but I think in this case I may have to leave the word to Chris directly, and I see there's not much time left actually for Q&A, but I'm happy to stay a little bit longer. Maybe concluding with Chris saying a few things about this approach of writing before the film.
Hi everybody. My name is Chris Perry. I'm the writer and director of Little Bird. Enrica asked me to reflect for a minute on the value of bringing music into the conversation early. In our film, we brought her in when we were still doing the animatic. So this is before edit lock, it's picture lock. We were still figuring out how our film works. And it's immensely valuable because the script talks about what happens on screen. We get to see the actions of the characters. The script covers what characters are saying, but it doesn't talk about music. When I wrote the script, I wasn't thinking about music, and yet music is this critical part of our emotional journey in the film. And so by bringing in Enrica and thinking about like what's going to be going on during this shot when these actions are happening, what are we going to be hearing, what are we going to be feeling? There were parts of this film that on the script were maybe two or three lines, and they turned into 30 seconds of just beautiful music and simple actions going on screen. And if we hadn't had the music in there, we might have just made the shots reflect the amount of lines that exist on the page. So a two-line shot might only be a fraction of a minute. So it was like bringing in our third major emotional tool, right? Visuals are one, dialogue's the second, and then the sound and music is the third. So we brought Sarah in early, and the project really benefited for it. So I think it would be foolish to wait much longer, and hope you enjoy the rest of the festival.
So yes, so elaborating really, I mean, that was really a success because Sarah, who Chris mentioned earlier, also was the sound designer. So we had a lot of back and forth with her as well. She took ideas from my music and encompassed that into sound design and vice versa. So it was really creative. And all because of that kind of open-mindedness that we both, we three kept through the score. I've got another example from another testimonial
sorry.
that I'm calling. I'm just finishing
Enrica.
the last round. Yeah. Yes.
Okay, yeah. You can. We just don't have much time, but like.
Of course, the last slide is just. I mean, if you want to know more about the composers. Guides to music for film and media creators, I really recommend Vasco Excel's Guide to Music, because that, I mean, it covers some things that I did say in my practical work. Thank you. Sorry, I thought it was much shorter, but it wasn't. I hope it was.
No.
I hope you enjoyed.
Yeah, that was really awesome. Thank you very much for this lecture, for this masterclass. And unfortunately, we don't have much time, but I have only one. What's your favorite sound, actually?
Your favorite?
Sound.
Sound. What do you mean?
I mean, like in general, maybe you working so much with music, so you might have a favorite song.
At the moment, I mean, I'm going through a phase where I mean, I'm a very traditional composer, but my phase right now is like Picasso with his period, the different color periods. My phase right now is very hybrid orchestral, so anything that is orchestral, but it has a little bit of contamination, like the example that I was playing, the last one I played, it definitely is going in that direction. Yeah,
Thank you very much.
Thank you
it
for
was
your
really
time.
really nice.
And, it was helpful for directors especially, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the festival, as Chris said.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.